never made the connection between why I like gravitated to Esherick's stuff so much, that like my mom was actually an influence in that. But yeah, she would drag me around to like craft shows all around New Jersey, and I would go with her. She'd give me like, $10 to like load her car and unload it at the end of the day and carry all the boxes for her and stuff like that. And so I would go to these like craft festivals and walk around, and might go to these other craft festivals where like people are wood carving, and my dad would take us to those and like get second prize or first prize in the jury selection for these ducks, and like, stupid ducks, that's dumb, like folk art, like. And then my mom was doing this like weird folk art, and then I don't know, there's a folk element to like what I do and like my aesthetic also. And I was like, it's funny how much I like ripped off my own parents, but I don't know, I just said a mouthful. I don't know where we are.
It's incredible. I actually, while you were talking, I was just looking up Nakashima's work. And one of the things that, one of the details in your work that I'm very attracted to, and I want to learn more about this, because ironically, about maybe within the last year, I was like thumbing around on like Amazon books, and I saw this one book that was dedicated completely to Japanese cleats and joiners. And I was like, I didn't know. I mean, like, furniture design to me, like, I like what I like, and I don't know much about it, but like, I can at least understand art history and know where things fit. But like, then I started looking at your work, and I was like really attracted to the aesthetic of these beautiful joining cleats that you use to hold, it seems like, as like maybe an aesthetic detail or maybe a functional piece to hold reclaimed work together where there might be an imperfection.
Oh, you're talking about like butterfly stitches or like
what stuff, right? Please educate me and talk to me about this, because they're absolutely beautiful, and they seem to be an element in your work.
Yeah, they're called like that was like absolutely one of the first things like I gravitated towards aesthetically, as like it's just a super obvious joint, like but like a wedge shape that would like suture a crack back together, right? It's a repair. It's like a repair of an imperfect thing, and it's like it goes to the whole. There's the whole Japanese wabi-sabi. I'm sure you've heard that term before, right? Like, I hope I hate that term as much as I hate upcycled, but wabi-sabi is like kind of like the Japanese premise of like the defect is like the best part, like, so let it be, like, like let nature have its say. Like it goes to like like a traditional way to like mend a crack in a pot would be like seal it with gold, you know what I mean? You're like fix pottery with gold, you know what I mean? And that's like it's almost like
yep yeah.
So it's like this like embellishment of a defect, like it's almost like a drawing an arrow and a pointer and like accentuating something that wasn't right to begin with. Like, look, obviously a piece of wood should be pristine without any cracks or flaws, right? And that's just not how it is ever.
Remember Mick said something very specific about that. He was like shaping boards. He said when he fucked something up, he would be like, oh, like just make it an attribute of the board, mate. And I was like, okay. And he would like fix it, and like he had this and it led to a lot of really cool things for him. I thought that was really funny. But same thing, like, oh, it's you can fix it.
I think I kind of share. I think you're talking about Mick Mackey. And
yeah.
I think he had I think I have a lot in common with him in that, like, he's a guy that's doing it his own way. He's like feeling out his own shapes, and like, and he's a little rough around the edges, like me. Like, I'm like, my stuff's like not pristine. Like, if you're like a true like joinery snob, or like whatever. Like you get to like or like a real woodworking snob. Like you can look at my stuff. It's not great. Like, I mean, I'm like my worst critic. It's horrible if you ask me. But it's like there's something to it's horribleness. It's wabi sabi. It's like, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna keep on going. Like, I'm gonna push this. Like, we're gonna let this ride kind of thing. It's kind of vibe in spots, you know. So those butterfly sutures are like pretty cool. And then I've gotten into like, you know, and it's funny. It's funny because you were talking about like the going back to surfboards. So like the very first butterfly stitch I ever made was in one of my Alaya surfboards. So the first Alaya surfboard that I ever made, I like took out surfing, like smashed it into the bottom, like, you know, nose dove it into the sandbar, and it split like halfway up to one side. And so I was like, I just spent like 6 hours, you know, like making that thing. And I was like, let me try this thing. I saw it in this book, you know, and I was like, I made a butterfly, and I was like, and it came out pretty good. Actually, I saved that part of the surfboard that survived like years later. I still have it because I was like, these are my first butterflies ever. And I've made like 8 million of them since. And like, I would say like 7 million of them came out acceptable. And you know, and maybe like some of them came out good, and like maybe like 4 of them came out perfect. You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to get exactly right. But I mean, you know, it's all in how you want to, like, how close you want to focus, how much you want to zoom in, and like with your own eyes. But like you said, Chris, about you were talking about Mick Mackey. Like, I definitely feel like we're both kind of like fly by the seat of our pants kind of shapers. Like, whereas like, yeah, I was like grinding, and then I was like, oh, it was a little too much. So then I was like, I'll do a little too much over here, and that'll be a little cooler. You know, there's an experimentation that's like, maybe it's not, I don't know, to like a purist, like, might not be the most like elegant way to work, but like, I don't know, there's also something like kind of cool that comes out of like the chaos of just like having to make it. Like, I'm just gonna make it, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna throw that there, and do this. Like, you know, like, I felt like that's how Mick shapes surfboards, and I felt like he's made me some magical surfboards that are like space machines, you know.
But you know what that comes from? That comes from a certain amount of confidence in your craft, and your kind of like headspace and your ability to overcome the flaw or the mistake, and then acknowledge it and be like, you know what, I'm going to embrace this, and I'm going to take it in this direction. And I think all artists do that. You know, it was funny. I don't know if you know this, but like I teach high school art classes, and we were working today. Just today, I was working on like 1 point perspective with like a bunch of ninth graders, and this one kid was like, "Oh, I messed up my lines. Like, it's all wrong." And I'm like, "Dude, it's like Bob Ross. Make it a happy accident," you know.
Mick called. He goes, "Dude, you didn't mess up." He goes, "Just make it like a selling point, like an attribute to the board." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right."
Yeah, but that's literally it. But I mean, like, well, that's the thing is like, what am I gonna do? Like, what am I gonna do? Throw this out and cry about it? Like, I just spent 8 hours getting to this point, and like we're at like this juncture, and this thing went wrong, or like didn't go right, you know, like, or like maybe. And here's like, and this is another reason, like, maybe I didn't do anything wrong, but maybe like the most beautiful piece of wood, like, and this is very true, is like the best looking parts of the wood are around like areas that tend to crack, because the grain is running wild, and like, you know, so like you'll wind with like, you know, near the crotch of a tree or something, the grain will be, you know, awesome. And like, oh, I want to look at that. That's going to be the best part. But like, oh yeah, but there's this big, ugly, the gash running through it, because like, that's what happens to wild grain is it splits up. And you're like, well, that's cool. That's what happens to wild grain is it splits up. So you like, we're just going to take this thing that happened and we're going to decorate it a little bit and make it pretty. And so I started out doing a lot of those butterflies. And then I got into like, just like patchwork, like where you just like, I call them like obvi patches, where you just like, you're like, oh, this was wrong. And I'm just going to put this big square, like right over top. There's a knot right there. And instead of being like a round natural knot, there's like a square right there.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes
I love that.
Populate.
Yeah, I love that, because I was looking at those. I was looking at the butterflies, and then I was looking at those squares that like you just like drop right into this organic form, and it kind of disrupts the flow of like maybe the grain, and it's like this industrial, like you were saying before, it's this industrial influence that you're kind of like exerting onto the organic form, and it creates this energy between shapes and forms. And I loved it. I loved it so much. It was like almost arresting, to see that, that like that square just like dropped right into a, like, yeah, I don't know what
I wouldn't say that I did. I definitely didn't invent it at all. Like I was inspired by other people who had like, and that's called a Dutchman. Like that's like a common term, like in woodworking. Like if you had like, say like you change a door in a house and the hinge falls in a different place and you have to like cover up where the hinge got notched into the door, you cut a Dutchman in and you patch it, and that's what that's called. It's like, it's not something I made up, but I never saw anybody else like kind of do it the way I'll just throw like almost like redacted, like I'll put black squares, like, or use like really obviously wrong patches where the right patch should go. And or like I've always seen people color match them, or like, I've seen them stacked where like you just kind of keep on adding patches over patches over patches until you wind up with this like cubist art that's really beautiful. Right. But I had never seen anybody else like just kind of do like just a blank black like right over top of something that was wrong. I'd be like, oh well, like that's not right either. But I'm like, yeah, I know.
I like it. I think it's like there's this beautiful organic grain and things like that, and you smack in this kind of heavy-handed thing. It's kind of definitely indicative of your style.
Yeah, I was like, literally, I'm sitting next to my bed, and I'm like looking at my bed, and I'm like, yeah, like these. I never. Yep. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Flip my camera around. I don't think you can flip your camera around on Zoom. But anyway,
computer. I can see it. I was thinking. Now, this may be a reach, all right, but. There's a contemporary artist, a painter that I studied in graduate school, and I still admire very much. His name is Sean Scully, and there was a period in time where he was creating these canvases that he would build the canvases in a way so that there might be an area within the canvas that could receive a second canvas, like an insert, or maybe even like a piece of metal that is that dimension that would like fit right in there. Modular and it would, it was modular, and it would throw off the geometry of his. He paints a lot of stripes and bands and squares, and there's a lot of expression in the brushstroke and everything, but then all of a sudden there would be like boom, like this like really odd insert that would throw it all out of whack, and that was the tension and the energy. And like when I look at your work, when I look at like the Dutchman and the butterfly stitches, I'm like that creates that tension. It's of course it's a technique, but like it's yours. It's like it's your signature in a way.
I think it is. But that's the other thing too. With woodworking is like